Be seated, please.
I read a story this past week about a woman who got a job as a temp. And she became a temp in a bank. And so she went to work at this bank, and what she witnessed was some very unprofessional behavior. And so as she worked in this bank, what she saw is that a lot of the workers were sort of college age. They're in their early 20s, mid-20s. And then there was the supervisor who was sort of a generation older than them. And the supervisor and all of the workers were very friendly. They would take long coffee breaks together. They would take long lunches together. In fact, all the workers would go in to the supervisor's office and sort of sit at the desk and gossip about other employees and workers, and sort of this was the environment that this young temp entered. And she saw how unhealthy it was, but then it even got more apparent how unhealthy this was because they had hired a woman who was in her 30s. And this woman, she was professional. She, acted professional. She treated other people as professional. And very soon, all of the employees at this bank didn't want anything to do with her. This woman would walk up to their conversations, and the conversation would just end. They would talk about her behind her back. They would talk about what she was wearing or how she looked and all of these things. And this woman, by all accounts, was shunned and unwelcome. The temp, she wasn't called into work for a few weeks. And then when she did come back into work, everything was different. All of the employees were sitting at their desks or standing at their stations. They were all fixated on their work. They were all very professional and courteous to the customers and to one another. There was no long coffee breaks. There was no long lunches. It was completely different. Nobody was in the supervisor's office sitting and gossiping with her. That supervisor had been fired. And this supervisor wasn't replaced by a stranger. She was replaced by the 30-year-old woman who had started there just a few weeks prior. You see, the bank hired this woman to be the new supervisor. But they didn't tell anyone else. They said, we want you to see the character and work ethic of all of your employees unedited. And man, did she ever. She saw how unprofessional and lazy, and she saw all of their character. And it all changed as soon as she became the supervisor. Well, what changed, really? Well, physically, the only thing that really changed was one person that was replaced. That was it. You take out one person, you put one more person in, and yet everything about this culture was changed. And you think about it, all of the coworkers began to think of themselves differently. They started to be professional. They started to be courteous. They started to be conscientious about their work. When the supervisor's new character and authority were revealed, it changed the employees' posture toward themselves and toward her. All of a sudden, they wanted to be like she was. Why? Because they didn't want to get fired. But that's a reason. But it also changed their posture toward her. And when I hear stories like this, it's just fascinating to me how one thing can change so much about everything else. And as we think about this in our relationship with God especially, I really want to talk about this thing called posture. No, not the posture your mom wanted you to have when she told you to stop slouching. But the posture that we have toward God, the attitude that we have toward God, the disposition that we have towards God. And so when we approach God, we need to have the right posture. And if we have the right posture before God, it actually changes everything about our life. I promise you, I'm going to show you this. We're going to look at a passage today that will show you that the posture you have towards God changes everything about your life. And so we're going to read Luke chapter 20. Verses 9 through 16, because our attitude toward him matters. So Jesus was talking mainly to a group of leaders. They were the rabbis, the teachers of the law, the people that knew stuff. They were in charge of stuff. And so he begins by telling them this parable. He said he went on to tell the people this parable. A man planted a vineyard, rented it to some farmers, and went away for a long time. At harvest time, he sent a servant to the tenants so that they would give some of the fruit of the vineyard. But the tenants beat him and sent him away empty-handed. He sent another servant, but that one also they beat and treated shamefully and sent away empty-handed. He sent still a third, and they wounded him and threw him out. Then the owner of the vineyard said, "What shall I do? I will send my son, whom I love. Perhaps they will respect him." But when the tenants saw him, they talked the matter over. "This is the heir," they said. "Let's kill him, and the inheritance will be ours." So they threw him out of the vineyard and killed him. What then will the owner of the vineyard do to them? He will come and kill those tenants and give the vineyard to others. When the people heard this, they said, "God forbid." We read parables like this in the Bible, and we're like, I thought the Bible was supposed to be a good book. Well, what's really going on here? Well, if you know the story, it probably doesn't take you long to figure out, okay, the owner is God the Father. He's the one who owns the vineyard, bought the vineyard. The vineyard is Israel. It really represents God's people. And so this would have been an analogy they used over and over again in the Old Testament. There's probably half a dozen examples or so of this. And I'll show you one in just a moment. The workers or the farmers or the tenant farmers were Israel's leaders in this parable. They're the ones that are supposed to be in charge. They're supposed to be taking care of what God had entrusted to them. And really, you could say it's just Israelites in general. The servants are the prophets. They're the ones who have been sent to give this message to the tenant farmers, right? Or in the Old Testament, they're the ones who've been sent to give God's message to the people. And then you have the Son, which is Jesus. This is the Son that comes and is mistreated. And so we watch this parable. What do we have? We've got God who builds this beautiful vineyard. He allows other people to work in it. And basically, they don't want to give God what is rightfully his. None of the grapes go to him. None of the wine goes to him. None of the profits go to him. They are acting as owners. So what's the problem in this parable? I think a lot of people read it and say, well, the problem is they're greedy. That's the root problem of this. They want more. They just want more and more. And even though they're just tenants, they want to own the vineyard. They want all the grapes of the vineyard. They want all the money from the vineyard. Is greed a big problem in our world today? Yeah, it's a big problem. Is it a big problem in this story? Yes, it's a big problem in this story. It's a big problem in our world, but is it the root problem in this parable? No. Some of you might read and say, like, okay, the problem in this is violence. They are violent to all of... Is it the problem of the parable? Well, it's true. It is a problem. Do we see violence being a problem in our world? And it is. Every week there's another shooting. Every week there's another tragedy. And we see that it affects us. It affects loved ones. It affects churches. It affects family members. It is so sad and it's heartbreaking. But is it the primary problem in our world? No. Well, it's stubbornness. Do you know anyone who's stubborn? Me neither. I don't want to admit that I might be stubborn, right? Which is just perpetuating my own stubbornness. Is stubbornness a problem in this parable? Yeah, they don't want to listen to anyone. Is it the root problem of this parable? No. Is a problem in our world stubbornness? Yes, it's all over the place. But what is the root problem in this parable? So the reality is it's kind of respect. We see the owner kind of talking about this. He's like, well, really, it's a respect issue. So I'm going to send my son so they'll respect someone. But even further into this, what we realize is that the tenant's posture toward themselves is, I'm an owner. I own the vineyard. I own the grapes. I own the stuff. And so then their posture is one of owner against the true owner. And so everything that unfolds after this is because they have the wrong posture toward the owner of the vineyard. Do you think it's possible that our biggest problem today is that people have the wrong posture toward God? Do you think it's possible the biggest problem that we have is we posture ourselves as owners rather than tenants? We posture ourselves as owners of our life and our stuff and everything that we have, and then we treat God like he's not the owner of us. And so it's our posture and attitude toward him that actually reveals all of the violence and the anger and the stubbornness and the greed and all of the corruption that we see in our world. Is that the root problem of what we see? I want to show you a little bit more into this parable. One of the most famous passages about Israel being the vineyard comes from Isaiah chapter 5. In Isaiah 5, 1 through 7, this is how it reads. It says, I will sing for the one I love. It's a love song toward God who's done these things with his people. I will sing for the one I love, a song about his vineyard. My loved one had a vineyard. On a fertile hillside, he dug it up and cleared it of stones and planted it with the choicest vines. He built a watchtower in it and cut out a winepress as well. Then he looked for a crop of good grapes, but it yielded only bad fruit. Now, you dwellers in Jerusalem and people of Judah, judge between me and my vineyard. What more could have been done for my vineyard than I have done for it? When I looked for good grapes, why did it yield only bad? Now I will tell you what I am going to do to my vineyard. I will take away its hedge, and it will be destroyed. I will break down its wall, and it will be trampled. I will make it a wasteland, neither pruned or cultivated, and briars and thorns will grow there. I will command the clouds not to rain on it. The vineyard of the Lord Almighty is the nation of Israel, and the people of Judah are the vines, and he delighted in. And he looked for justice, but saw bloodshed, for righteousness, but heard cries of distress. And so what has the owner done to establish his vineyard? Let's look at this passage. I think it's fascinating to see all of the things that he's done. And so he bought a field on a fertile hillside. I don't know if you know this, but Israel is all hillsides. So if you're going to grow something, it's going to be on a hill. So he buys a fertile hillside. Then what does he have to do? Well, if you grow something on a hillside, you actually have to dig it up and clear away its stones. And so this is sort of what it would look like. It would have been, would have looked like this, where it's terraced. And so what you have to do if you're going to own a vineyard in this area is you have to go in and you actually have to flatten a part where you put the vines, and then you have to allow it to slope down after that, and then do another flat part after that. How many of you would sign up for this job? It's like, no, let's hire that done. It'd be so hard. And so the owner of this vineyard has already done this. He's already terraced the hillside and cleared out all the stones, because if you build on a hill, what are you going to have? Lots of rocks. And so then he planted the best vines. And so you got to do some research. Okay, what vines are we going to use? And so he chooses the best ones. And he plants them. Well, how long do vines take to grow? To get grapes, it's usually about 5 years of pruning stuff before you have a vine that's strong enough to grow decent grapes. At least so I'm told. And so he prunes away for as long as it takes to have a strong vine to grow the best grapes. He builds a watchtower so he can look over what he has made. He cuts out a wine press so that the grapes can be turned into wine. He builds a hedge or a wall around everything to protect it from others or from other animals. He pruned and cut out the thorns, and so he's got his pruning shears out, constantly taking care of it, and he waited for good grapes. And the Isaiah passage tells us the good grapes didn't come. In other words, the people were not faithful. And the parable that Jesus tells us is what? The people that were taking care of the grapes were not faithful. So what's going on here? What do we see here? Well, we see the attitude that isn't right. We see the attitude that isn't proper. The owner, in the owner's absence, he invited tenants who assume that they own everything they touch. Do you know anyone who assumes they own things that they don't own? It's this entitlement that comes. And so they walk on the land and they think, this is my land. They touch the vines, they think these are my vines. They touch the grapes and they think these are my grapes. They use the wine press and think it's my wine press. They make wine and they think it's my wine. They take all of the product. These are my grapes. Everything belongs to me. They think like owners when they should think like tenants. And I just think that is one of the most crucial thing that every Christian has to realize, is that God is the owner. We are the steward. God is the one who owns everything. He has made everything. And so how do we do this? We do this all of the time. How many of you have bragged about something you can do in your life? I've done it. And what do we say? Well, I did this. Or I'm good at this. Who gave you your ability to do that? God did. So who gets the glory? God does. Whatever talent you have, it is from God. He gave you your mind. Whatever good thoughts come out of you come from the mind that He gave to you. And so if it's good at something, who gets the credit for that? Well, God does. If you're fast, who gets the credit for that? God does. If you're hardworking, you have a lot of endurance, and you can just work for hours and hours and hours, and this is how you've made a living for yourself all your life. Who gave you the ability to endure? God did. Who gave you your heart? God did. So if you have a soft heart and you're compassionate and people praise you for that, great. God gave that to you. Everything that we have has been given to us for God. And so when we come with abilities and skills and smarts and talents, and then we make anything for ourselves, then the product of those things, if we assume that some of that was from ourselves, we also assume is ours. And so we buy houses and we think, this is my house. This is my car. This is my pew. Right? You know you do it. Visitor comes. They sat in your pew. You don't have a pew. It's God's pew. You're just a tenant of that pew. So stop trying to own things that really belong to God. Who gets the credit for absolutely everything you have ever done and ever will do in your life? God does. He is the owner. And we look and like, who made the world? God made the world. Just like He bought the vineyard. He's the one that chose His people. He's the one who gave blessings to His people. He's the one that provides the rain, and it's everything that has been, the whole system of things that we live in has been provided by God. And so even if you think for a second you've done something on your own, the system in which you've made that was created by God. So then you can't really boast in anything, right? The question that we've got to start asking ourselves is your posture toward God like a tenant worker or pretend owner? And I would say that a lot of us act like pretend owners. We pretend that something we produce is ours, and we're not just the keepers of it for the one who made it all. Are you guilty of that? What things do you do that with? And how are you going to change your posture and attitude toward God in this? Let me give you a couple of things that just, hopefully will help you change your thinking about this. But tenant workers have a sense of historical gratitude, while pretend owners have a posture of self-centered entitlement. And so there's a contrast there, right? What's historical gratitude? It's kind of what we've been talking about. Recognizing that you have been given things that allowed you to do what you did. You're grateful because you stand on the shoulders of those who have gone before. Our church needs to have some historical gratitude. Guess what? This building is paid off. And guess who paid it off? Well, some of you, and also some of the ones who have gone before. So we stand on the shoulders of those who have gone before, and we do that with gratitude. The things that you know have been given to you by your parents, taught to you by your parents, or from mentors, or somewhere else. And so we need to have gratitude for what has come before. When we have a posture of, it's for me and I did it, this is when we act like pretend owners. Tenant workers labor for the owner's benefit, right? So as Christians, we labor for God's benefit, for his glory, for his praise, for his kingdom. Pretend owners labor for their own benefit. So when you go to work, when you go home, when you treat others, how you treat others, are you treating others as if you are a pretend owner? Or are you treating others like a steward, a tenant worker? It changes everything about how we relate to others. Do you see that? So your mission in life cannot be for yourself. Sorry. That's what selfish ambition is. But our mission in life is for God. Tenant workers know they are not in control. This is a big one for a lot of us, right? How many of you would love to just keep living under the illusion that you're in control? Yeah, I'm with you. I like it when I'm in control. I like to pretend that sometimes. But it's not how tenant workers work. If you work in God's vineyard, he could come in at any moment and say, okay, you got to work somewhere else. You can't be here. He's the one who owns it. Pretend owners live in the illusion that they have authority and power to live however they want. I think this is one of the reasons why our world is adamantly rejecting the idea of hell, that there is a hell. Because hell is the ultimate reminder that you do not own anything and that this is God's world. It's his vineyard. And so it's this idea of like, oh, what do you mean there's a judgment? There can't be a judgment day. Why do we not want to believe? It's a reminder that we are not the owners. It's also why we don't want to talk about old age. Why? Because as we get older, it's a reminder that we are not the owner. Some of you have no idea what I'm talking about. I barely know what I'm talking about this. I'm just now feeling it. You didn't need to amen that. But we start to lose our grip on that. We can't do this anymore. We can't do that anymore. And so what is this a reminder? It's a reminder that we do not own our life. We are just working in God's vineyard. We're working in his worlds. And he's the one who has the power. And so in some ways we know that we are not in charge, but in some ways we hate it. Do you feel this tension? It's normal. It's not, it's part of figuring all of this stuff out. Is some ways we know that we're not in charge, but in some ways we hate it. And so what this is that we see this happen with those in this parable. Is when the tenant saw him, they talked the matter over. This is the heir, let's kill him, so the inheritance will be ours. Why do they beat and throw out every servant and the son that comes? It's a reminder that they do not own the vineyard. And so they hate it. And this is, they're thinking to themselves, well, the owner must have died. This must be the one who owns it now. And so if we just take care of him, then we own it, right? It's let's continue to live under the delusion that we own this vineyard, and we do it at all costs. Romans 8 says we just do it naturally. It says the mind governed by the flesh, in other words, our natural mind, is actually hostile toward God. Our natural way of thinking is we don't want to admit that he's God. It does not submit to God's law, nor can it do so. And so just know that the natural way of everyone's mindset is to revert back to, I want to be an owner. And the only way to actually change that is to submit to God and to submit to his words and his life and imitate the things that he did in his life. And when we do that, all of a sudden, our life begins to change. Because we're not acting how we want to, we're acting how God wants to. I think when some read this story, they think, well, God is, man, how cruel, right? That he would come and take that vineyard away. And how mean of that. Why would he take that? They're the ones who made those grapes anyway, right? No. Even this parable reveals the patience and grace that God has for people like us. It reveals the patience and grace he has for us pretend owners out there. And so how many servants does he send? 3. How many would you have sent? Some of you are more patient than I am. I would have sent 1. And then I would have burnt the whole thing down. I would have walked in and said, you're fired, get out of here. I would have taken my little arm and I would have taken it back over and I would have sent everyone else out because they didn't know what their place was. But God gives us so much more patience. Thanks be to God because he gives us so much more patience than we would even give. Charles Spurgeon writes this. He says, the amazing thing about God is if you reject him, he answers you with tears. If you wound him, he bleeds out cleansing. If you kill him, he dies to redeem. If you bury him, he rises again to bring resurrection. Jesus is love made manifest. And so the love of God is even revealed as we realize that he's an owner. Even when he reveals something that we ultimately hate, that we don't own it, that he owns it, and we feel that tension, we also feel his love and how patient he is for us to get that. And so do you have the posture of a pretend owner? What do you do about that? I guess it really all boils down to this, is how do you treat God's Son? If you treat God's Son in the right way, then things are going to be okay. If you listen to his words, if you obey his words, if you're faithful to his commands, if you have a relationship with him, then things are going to be okay. But if you don't, this is where things get a little bit more messy. If we finish the rest of the parable in Luke 20:17 through 19, it says this: Jesus looked directly at them. He's looking at all of those teachers of the law and Pharisees and rabbis. Then what is the meaning of that which is written? The stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. Everyone who falls on that stone will be broken to pieces. Anyone on whom it falls will be crushed. The teachers of the law and the chief priests looked for a way to arrest him immediately because they knew he had spoken this parable against them. But they were afraid of the people. So what does this say? What does this mean? Well, who are the builders? I guess you could probably say the builders in this idea is, okay, the religious leaders. And what do they do with Jesus? They rejected him. And there's really 2 things that are going to happen in your approach to Jesus. Really 3 things that are going to happen, I guess. But we're going to either trip on the stone. So it says, those who fall on that stone. And throughout the Bible, we see that Jesus is often a stumbling block. It's just hard to believe that God would send his son to become flesh, and that son would die on the cross, and that son would be raised again. Like, those are things that make our minds stumble at times. And if you're going to stumble over that and not treat him like the cornerstone, what does it say? That you're going to fall on that stone and you're going to be broken. Or if you're going to ignore it altogether. You're not going to trip on it. You're not going to consider it. You're actually just going to be crushed by this. Because ultimately, there's a day that's coming in which all of creation will be judged because Jesus Christ is King and Judge of it all. So those are the 2 bad options. Or you can take that cornerstone that's been rejected by so many, and you can place it right in the center point of your house, right in the place where all other stones are laid, right in the spot that cannot be replaced by any other stone. It's the thing by which everything is built. And if you do that, if you submit to his words and say, I'm going to build everything on top of you, then what happens? Then we actually become sons and daughters. It's the strangest thing. When we submit to God's Son, when we act like tenants, when we are stewards, when we submit to everything about who Jesus is and we say, you're King, you're Master, you're Lord, I'll follow everything that you say, he's like, great, now you're sons. Now you're daughters. Now I will adopt you into my family, into my kingdom. Well, you will no longer be slaves and servants anymore. But when we try to take it ourselves, what happens? We don't work in his vineyard anymore. This is what we see in just a couple of passages. 1 John 3:1, see what great love the Father has lavished on us, that we should be called children of God. And that is what we are. Did you see that? We are children of God, not tenant workers anymore. Why? Because of Jesus Christ. The reason the world does not know us is that it did not know him. They've rejected the cornerstone. Or in Romans 8:17, now if we are children, then we are also heirs. What does this mean? When we submit to God, when we act like tenants to God, when we are stewards of God's things, he says, great, you are a son and a daughter, but also you are an heir. The vineyard is yours. The kingdom is yours. Everything that I have is yours. And you are co-heirs with your brother, Jesus Christ. What? How does this religion make any sense? I just spent the last 25 minutes telling you that you were not an owner. And we see the truth is God can only make us owners. And we only become owners through submission. So we are heirs of God and co-heirs with Christ if we submit to Jesus Christ. If indeed we share in his sufferings, in order that we also may share in his glory. And so the path to sonship, the path to being daughters, the path to being children of God is through submission. And so what we all have to do this morning is to put down our owner status. Stop claiming anything we are is from us. Stop claiming anything we have is from us. Stop claiming anything we know is from us, and realize the truth that every good and perfect gift is from God. If you need this truth planted deeper in your heart, I'd ask that you come while we stand and sing as we praise the God who has given us everything.
Let's stand together. Who am I that the highest King would welcome me? I was lost, but he brought me in. Oh, his love for me. Oh, his love for me. Who the Son sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God, yes I am. Free at last he has ransomed me, his grace runs deep. While I was a slave to sin, Jesus died for me. Yes, he died for me. Who the Son sets free, oh, he's free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God, yes I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. I am who you say I am. Who the Son sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God, yes I am. Who the Son sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God, yes I am. Be seated, please.
Good morning. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Stephen Deere, and I'm one of the elders here. And I want to give an invitation to anyone out there. If they have prayer requests, if they have needs, I ask that you come see me, come see one of my other fellow elders, Bob Ice, Bob Walker, Mike Hott, or Jeff Gibson. Also, find a staff member. Any of them will be happy to help. That's why we're here. We're also a congregation that values prayer. And there's a prayer room right now. If anyone feels they have a need, go ahead, go right to the back, and back to the hallway to the right, and then to the left, that first room. And there's a room there that someone will be happy to pray with you. If you bow with me right now for a word of prayer. Lord, we come before you realizing that this world is your vineyard, and we are your workers. And we thank you for that. We thank you for the opportunity to be stewards. And we ask that we are great stewards in you. We ask that this worship this morning was a sweet aroma to you. We ask that that you would send an extra portion of the Spirit within us as we go out. We ask that you would have a special hand in all of our ministries that we have here at San Jose, and we ask that we are a light into this community. And it's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
You know, being a tenant who becomes a son means that we have a temporary place here, but we got some place called home that we're going to. Let's stand together and sing about that on the way out. Won't you sign me up for the Christian Jubilee? Won't you write my name, put it on the roll? Well, I've been changed since the Lord has lifted me. I want to be ready when Jesus comes. Won't you sign me up for the Christian Jubilee? Won't you write my name, put it on the roll? Well, I've been changed since the Lord has lifted me. I want to be ready when Jesus comes. I said, don't you want to go to that land? Don't you want to go to that land? Don't you want to go to that land where I'm bound? I said, don't you want to go to that land? Don't you want to go to that land? Don't you want to go to that land where I'm bound? There ain't nothing but a love in that land, nothing but a love in that nothing but love in that land where I'm bound. There ain't nothing but love in that land, nothing but love in that land, nothing but love in that land where I'm bound. Won't you sign me up for the Christian Jubilee? Won't you write my name, put it on the roll? Well, I've been changed since the Lord has lifted me. I want to be ready when Jesus comes. I want to be ready when Jesus comes. I want to be ready when Jesus comes. May God bless you.